Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Led by Life. We're your hosts. I'm Rafaela, and this is Hannah. And for anyone who's new to the podcast, we are two manifestors in human design. We both carry manifestor energy, and that's how Hannah and I met. Was through a human design circuitry workshop, and it brought us together, and we realized quickly that we love to have the conversations around human design, how our own experiments with the system have been, how they're going, what it's like, and to just take a deeper dive into what it just means to be human and what comes up for us. So here we are. Welcome back.
Welcome, everyone. So today we are looking at gene key 7, 8.
8.
As it came out of my mouth, I was like, that's not right. It's 8.
I saw it.
So the 8 is the gate of contribution in human design, and in the gene keys, it is the shadow of mediocrity, the gift of style, and the Siddhi of exquisiteness. Did I get that right?
You got that right.
And I have this gate defined in my chart, and we were just talking before. You don't have this one defined, do you, Rafa? No, but this is our first channel. Mm-hmm. So we've talked a bit about the gates and what the gates are, and there's 64 gates in human design. So for anyone who's new to the system and wanting to know a little bit more about it, we all have gates defined in our chart, and most of us will also have channels. Unless you're a reflector, most of us will have channels. And what happens is when two gates meet, it creates a channel. So when there's two gates on either side of a center, an energy center, and there's 9 energy centers in the human design body graph, you have a channel. It creates a channel. And this is our first channel that we've explored, because we have already talked about the 1, and the 1 is in the G center, and then the 8 is in the throat. So when these two meet, it creates a channel between the G center and the throat. And what happens is when you have this channel, which I do, I've got the 1 and the 8, it then activates the centers on either side of the channel. And so this is exciting, because now we can talk about a whole channel. I mean, we've kind of talked a little bit about channels before in terms of the other hanging gates, but yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, we haven't come across one that you or I carry on our own, right? And so you have the channel of inspiration, correct?
The channel of inspiration, yeah. And this is actually what makes me a manifestor, this channel.
Right. So share about that, because yours is a unique expression compared to like what we talked about. You shared with me how it's a unique expression compared to many of the other energetic constitutions of manifestors and how they are manifestors.
Yeah. So this is something that Nikki really taught me, our human design teacher, is that for pure manifestors, they have a motor center connected directly to the throat. So the motor centers are the heart, the emotional solar plexus, and the root, I believe. Is it just those 3?
And the throat. The throat is a motor center.
The throat, yes. But you need to have like a motor center connected to the throat in order to be a pure manifestor. So I have a motor center, I have the heart, and it is connected to the throat, but it goes via the G center, via the identity center, which is what makes me a manifestor, but I'm not a pure manifestor, because that manifesting energy is when it goes like the motor, that real kind of energy to get things going and initiate. When it goes directly to the throat is where we kind of take action, and where things manifest from the throat. You know, this is where all the energy in the chart is heading towards. It goes from the crown from the head center and from the root, and it's kind of moving through the chart to get out, to come out of the throat. And so, yeah, it's been interesting, but also hard to learn about, to learn this about myself, because there's not a lot of information out there. Because technically, so how I'm actually like, I operate a lot more like a projector, because the channel of initiation is a projected energy. So this is what connects the heart to the G center. And the channel of inspiration, which we're going to be talking about today, is also projected energy, which connects the G center to the throat. So there's so much projected energy in my chart. And, it's been really hard to learn about this, because, it's also made a lot of sense, but it's also been hard to find information that relates to me, because it is quite rare how it works, how it moves through the chart. Yeah.
And sort of when I was reading a little bit about the eighth gate, isn't it that this eighth gate has a quality of it needing to be called out?
Yes. And so, which is the projected energy, right? Because projectors being one of the energy types in human design, their strategy is to be invited. So they have wisdom or things to share, but in order for it to really be effective, that needs to be called out of them. So people will recognize something within them, and they'll see that, and they'll call it out for them to share.
Yeah. It was also thinking that we can be called out by source, and everybody's own process and relationship to that might be a little bit different and unique for them, and how that would sort of sound to them, when it's not necessarily a person, right? Because you shared with me how you feel you've been called out by people around you. I think it was wasn't it like your aunt who asked you about talking more about human design in your podcast, right?
She did, yeah.
And then like you and I started, coming together to create this.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have this correct, but do you feel like some of your past clients were calling you out to create what you now have as your meditation course that you've recently launched?
Yeah, I have a really good example of how this has actually played out for me. So I have tried to put things out there in terms of the meditation teaching that I do. And when I try and kind of like push it out there and try and get people to sign up, it hasn't really been successful for me. Like I've had a handful of people, want to work with me, which has been great. And I'm grateful for that. And I'm also pretty early in this new career. It's essentially a whole new career for me. So there's that aspect. But then I also I created a course last year, and I had this woman who I know quite well signed up out of the blue, signed up and did my course. And I just thought, oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And she's actually a women's coach, and she specializes in fitness and nutrition, and women's mindset around health and well-being. And she, after doing my course, then reached out and said to me, I really like the way that you teach mindfulness, and you have a really practical way of sharing this information. I'd love to bring you on board to work with my clients. And so that clearly to me was an invitation. That was her seeing something within me that a gift or a skill that I have to share, and then inviting me into her coaching group to then provide this information and this support for her clients in that way. So that felt like a really clear example of an invitation. And yeah, I'm learning like these energetics. Again, both of us are really early on in our journey with human design. I've only really known about the system for a year. and been experimenting with it for about a year. I know it's been a little bit longer for you, but I'm so early on that I'm still learning these energetics and how it feels, but I'm starting to get the sense of, okay, those kind of invitations from other people are a bit more obvious, but then the invitations from source, from life, are sometimes less clear. Sometimes it's a bit more of a feeling within me, like this is something that I want to do, or this is something that I'm here to do. So that's something I'm still learning, and it's also related to my profile. The 2-5 is both energies are projected, which means that people will again see something in you and then call it out of you. So the 2 being the hermit, who kind of wants to hide away and just be in their own energy, be alone, which is so me. But then there's also the 5 who wants to be the hero and wants to be out there helping people and saving the day. And so both energies have this projection field, and both energies get called out. And so, I mean, it's hard. It can be hard because sometimes you can't see yourself clearly, and you can't know what people are thinking or how people are interpreting you. I often feel misunderstood. But I'm learning. It's a process. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Do you feel the same with because you're a 2-4?
Feel the same in what regard?
With the being called out. What's been your experience with those invitations and that projected energy?
Yeah. I don't know. That's such a tricky one because, I've shared with you often that, or maybe I have shared with you often, I certainly have thought this many times, is that I'm realizing that when I look back and I see how my life sort of played out in different parts, prior to learning human design, I'm like, wow, this was like already sort of happening, this way that my energy was working. And then you learn about human design, and it's not that it hasn't. I feel like it still has, things have sort of happened that will confirm the way human design expresses things, like being called out or initiating, or any kind of other things, but those 2 to be specific. And prior, like, I could see where I was just talking to my boyfriend about this. Right after college, I wasn't even going to go get a job. I was like, no, I think I'm going to like just keep waitressing for a while, and I'm going to save some money and stuff, and I'm going to go travel. I've never done anything like that. And a friend of mine, my very good friend, had another friend, and she was like, hey, Erica works here, and they're like looking for new positions, and it's an entry-level position. Something for you would be perfect. You just graduated. And in my head, I was like, well, I mean, all right, why not? Let's just do it.
Why not?
And that to me is so resonant to how the 4 in my profile is. They call it like the opportunist, and it's much more about like my external world. And it just so happens that like that is exactly how I feel things do kind of come along, is that it's in the network of people that I have that will sort of share with me these opportunities sometimes. And I mean, it's happened on other occasions that way, few and far in between, but they have happened, and most of them come around opportunities related to like work service. So for that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like my 4, really, I have an understanding of it. I think I have a very good understanding of it. Now, 2, having this hermit side, I feel like I'm just now, well, when I came across human design, I was sort of in a place where I was going through a lot of things, like physically. I'd moved back home, and I was just spending more time at home, and I was learning how to spend more time with myself. I had just gotten out of a 10-year relationship, and I was really cultivating this. And at times it'd be really uncomfortable to not initiate any plans for the weekend or do anything like that. And it's like my body knew I didn't want to. But there was this, like, sometimes this compulsion to still do so. And then the end of the weekend would come and I'd be like, I wish I would have just like stayed home by myself, or really just been in my own energy for those couple of days. And so now if like relating that to work, and how the two is often projected, it's still something that I have to like deeply trust, because I sometimes have this voice that comes along that's like, well, if you're just over in your corner doing your thing, how will anybody really know what you're doing? How will it happen? And I think that that's like a perfect invitation to practice what it means to trust and surrender and leave space, all of those concepts that we talk about sometimes, where, you know, can you receive or hear like the whispers from source, or in your relationship with the divine, of like calling you out to do something, to create something. And so it's still very much something that I'm working with right now.
Yeah, I felt like just learning about it, just learning that I do have this hermit archetype energy, has almost been like a permission from the universe to just be like, it's okay that you love spending time alone and that you love spending time at home. And, you know, maybe there's so many different things that can come in, like the conditioning that we should be busy, or we should be doing things, or we should be social, or whatever it is. So there's so many different things that can be at play, but just the kind of awareness that like this is just a part of who you are. It's almost felt like a relief for me to just honor that part of myself. But it doesn't mean that it's not easy. It doesn't mean that it's always easy to do that. Right. It doesn't mean that I don't have that doubt come up as well, especially when it comes to creativity and my gifts. Like I also have this, it's interesting we're talking about this, because in the first gate, there is this, it talks a lot about in the gene key, the first gene key, we talked about this void or the boredom and the natural cycle of creativity, and how it is a bit of an on-off energy. And so for me, I've been coming to terms with the fact that so much of my energy is on-off. My creativity is on-off. I have these periods where I'm not inspired, and it's often then that I can kind of dip into the shadow of, is it melancholy? The first shadow?
The first one? It might be, yeah.
Something like that. No, entropy, but this feeling of like numbness, and kind of like, oh, will this inspiration come back? Will I have this creativity again? Will I feel inspired again? And it's similar with the manifestor energy as well. Our energy is on off. So in these rest cycles, it can be hard to trust that we will get another urge to create something or initiate something. And then the same goes for my profile as well. So there is such a big element of trust in life that and with this hermit energy, that as long as we're just in our own space, doing our own thing, cultivating our gifts and working on what it is that we're good at, someone will call it out. Someone will see it and call it out. And whether it's people or whether it's life, that's something I'm still not, like I said before, still not confident in, is kind of distinguishing or reading those energetics. But I guess that comes with practice and time.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you talk about like the on off and the cycles, because I've been sort of paying attention a little bit more to what that means for me as far as like the creativity and the rest. And it's been coming up for me a lot, and something that sort of how I shared with you before we started today, of I feel as if I actually may not really be in a period of time of creating for the sense of like initiating, like going ahead. I feel like I'm in this very much this like everything's brewing. That's the only way I can describe it. Like everything's brewing and there's not real clarity on any one thing. And whereas before I was like, maybe like the end of last year, the last couple months, and maybe up until the beginning of this year, I was very like antsy and really eager and sort of felt like this need to do something. And I know why I felt this need to do something is because some of the other things that I had been involved in and engaged in for the majority of all of last year were really coming to an end towards July. And so then the later half of the year, I was like, all right, like if I don't have this going, bringing income, like taking up my space, then I need to be sort of engaging in creating something for myself to, well, one, because I'm self-employed, and to be active in I don't know, creation or creativity. And I know that I really wanted to do it. And then I was kind of like what I was sharing with you right before we started. Like I just have realized like I am like being in this podcast is such a creative process. Really. And is bringing me much more than I anticipated. And I feel as if like there's still some, you know, conditioned voices as far as like, well, you like open this business and you're not doing enough for the practice, the business being the practice. But honestly, I just don't think that right now is my time to be like fussing over this idea of what I need to like create, because I honestly just don't really have the space for it. And I think that's a clear sign right now that it's just, you've got enough, right?
Not the time.
Like, it's not the time and you've got enough. And so kind of like retracting back into doing what you have and resting at the same time, not needing to like pack more on or do more. And in my cycles of like even during the day, like I was going to ask you this. Do you feel like you go through highs and lows, you know, with this manifestor energy of really being like on and then completely flat? You feel like you go through that on a daily basis sometimes?
Yeah, I do. And it varies day to day. I do. I'm still getting into a rhythm with how I want my weeks to look and my days to look, but I'm wanting to have a balance of, because I do have all of my arrows point to the left. So that means that consistency feels good to me, having a level of consistency. But I'm also learning to have a balance between structure and then also open space so that I can listen to my urges if they come up, but then also allow myself to rest if that's what I'm feeling I need on that day. And it's interesting. I wanted to say before that I feel like so much of it is conditioning, that feeling almost guilty for resting, allowing ourselves to be resting and not doing something or not initiating. And probably because, I mean, 70% of the population are generators. So they do have that more kind of consistent energy throughout the day. And so for manifestors, and I'm sure it's similar for projectors and reflectors as well, we don't have that kind of constant, and we need to rest. Like everyone needs to rest, but we in particular need to allow space for rest. And I feel like the society we live in does not value rest and does not value that time to go inward and have that introspection. And when you were saying before about you feel like things are just brewing, I feel like that is such an important part of the process that people don't talk about, is having that time to take a step back, to reflect, to think about the ideas and to kind of let them brew and let them simmer away. And I feel like I've done this recently with social media. I've taken a big step back. I took a break inadvertently. I didn't plan to take a break, but I found myself not having the urge to put anything out there really for the last couple of weeks. And it's been so helpful to take that step back so that I can be like, well, and reflect and kind of be in my own bubble, in my own space, and think like, well, how do I actually want to use social media? How do I want to interact with this? How can I let these platforms serve me? I know we've talked about social media so much over our last few conversations, but it really does feel like I'm at this point now where I'm like, I don't want to keep doing things the way I've been doing them before. I want to do it in a really unique way, which I guess we'll get into with this 8th gene key, because it's all about uniqueness and style and doing things differently. And so it's been in taking a step back and having that space to reflect and to not feel like I have to be out there putting things out there, that it's actually given me that time to come to a place of clarity on how I want to use social media and how I want to create moving forward.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing when you started sharing that bit about creating like a new way, because that's a lot of what I took back from reading about the 8th gene key. And it's just interesting because as I was reading it, I was like, and this is something I wanted to share with you earlier when you were talking about, oftentimes with the two needing to like be reflected back on how we are. That's really good for us to get those reflections from other people. And I was thinking, like, when I was reading it, I can see so much of how, like, you do just embody this ability to me, based on what I've known and seen of you, to create things for yourself through your own like just a really individual process, but yet hit the collective, as you've maybe have seen, on such a bigger scale. And it's very much unique to you. Like, you're not, from the things that I've seen, and yes, I guess when we relate it to it being like the content that you do create for social media, or even in your podcast, or even in the way that you've like funneled this gift through our podcast. Like, if for any of you who don't know, like, Hannah has really been such an important and supportive process of like the actual Instagram and the way it looks. And I have to say that because it's just so stinking pretty to me. It's so pretty. And she sort of just went in there on a whim and like you did your thing, and I love it, and it's so, to me, aesthetically pleasing. And so when I was reading it, I was just thinking to myself how and I don't know if you feel this sometimes, but there's a part of the 8th gene key where he talks about how it actually is also sort of scary when you start to embody this this quality of, let's say, is it individuality or
yes, I want to have a quick look, because I highlighted it. I highlighted so much of this chapter.
Did you highlight the whole chapter?
It's like half of my book is highlighted. But he talks a lot about one of the deep fears emerging from the 8th gene key is the fear of success. This fear is reinforced through its programming partner, the 14th shadow of compromise. You compromise your dreams, not because you fear you will fail, but you know that to succeed, you will have to rebel against the whole of society and its expectations of you. And I just got chills, like, yeah, anyway, let me go on, because he then talks about mediocrity, which is the shadow of this expression. And he says mediocrity is defined by others rather than by yourself. And mediocrity has two main functions. So the first function is that it keeps you from thinking outside the box. And then the second function is to serve the machinery of society rather than evolution. Oh gosh, like, yeah, I'm just getting chills reading it. But if you wish to escape mediocrity, you will have to find your own path and invent your own identity in the world. It will be like no other path, and it will take you beyond your comfort zone into dangerous territory where there are no assurances that you will succeed except for your faith in your own deep and vibrant nature. And then I'm just like covered in goosebumps right now. But then when we get into the Siddhi, which is exquisiteness, I think he talks a little bit about how the thing is that these people, or the people who embody this gift, they don't even really care. They get to a point where they're like, I'm not even doing this to be accepted or to fit in with society or to fit in with other people, because the freedom that they experience from just being their own selves is so much more, is worth it to kind of be on the outside of, on the, what does he call it? The outskirts of society. Is that what it's called?
The outsiders.
Yeah.
He calls them outsiders. But truly they're not, but then like they're not really outsiders. Something, I don't know if I read it correctly or whatever.
Yes.
Right. They're not really outsiders though. Like in the bigger realm of like maybe the collective consciousness, you're actually very much the insider, kind of paving this way for everyone to step out of their comfort zones.
Yes, because I think he talks about you're an insider as in you're connected to nature and to life, because it's like being, I don't know the words exactly, but it's like you're closer to nature because nature is wild. Nature doesn't follow the same paths and the same patterns, and it's wild.
Yeah.
And I just want to read the last bit that I highlighted. So, to them, the only outsiders in the world are those who look outside of themselves for guidance or definition, and the only strangers in the world are those who spend their lives in imitation of someone else, because that is what makes them strangers unto themselves.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know where to begin with all of this.
I know.
Because when I was reading it, I was thinking about like my process with human design and how it has, and we've talked about, we'll continue to talk about, because essentially a lot of human design, I believe, is also the process of deconditioning, which I feel is very much a layer of this eighth gene key. I mean, in the shadow, when it's mediocrity, and he talks about what you just said of kind of the machinery of society. He relates a lot of this to the I don't know if public, but the education system. Sorry if it's cut.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah, the education system, and saying how like not all children learn the same way, and that for some, like, it's formal education can be really good, and then for others it really doesn't do anything. And it's sort of like it feels like this is where there's this energy of pushing everyone to sort of be the same, and then you lose your own sense of personal identity. And that's a lot of what I was reflecting back when I was reading, was about how you do have a defined identity center. I mean, I don't know if you felt this way, like growing up, of really being your own unique self, in a sense of having like your own style, whether it be like style when we talk about like the physical realm, or style in the way you carry yourself, which is probably more what he's talking about and what this is expressing. Whereas for me, like my G center is open. Like I have an undefined identity center, and I feel as if I'm getting to a place now where I'm really starting to notice what is it like to be who I am, who I want to be, and how I bring in the deconditioning part is when I start to shed some of these layers that I feel have sort of just been taught or kind of pressed by the outside, then I'm really met with this place of sort of meeting what is this current identity that I am embodying right here and right now? Like how do I just want to express, which has honestly kind of been a struggle for me throughout most of my life. Like if we bring it down to like the simplest thing when it comes to like clothing and actual like sense of style, when we think of it like that, I feel like mine's always been a little different and has also been a place of like insecurity for me. And you know, like it sounds very, it may sound silly, but even wearing this longer necklace, when it's my grandmother's necklace, and when she gave it to me and I realized that it was a little longer than I wanted it to be, and these parts right here, if you're watching the YouTube, like you'll see it. If you're on Spotify, I apologize, maybe just go check out the YouTube. But they have like diamonds in these little, I don't know what you would call this, but anyway. And I thought it was like super flashy, and I had all these thoughts around like, you know, what would maybe like my clients think if they see my necklace, and I had all of these thoughts about how I'd be perceived. And then I actually realized this like the other day, I haven't even taken it off in weeks. I've just sort of like embraced it. And it wasn't even like a thought of like, no, Rafa, you're going to keep this necklace on because it's like you like it and it's a part of this identity you're holding and it makes you feel good and this and that. And it just sort of happened. Like I didn't have to force it. I didn't do anything about it. And I'll just say this one bit about the identity center. I have learned that for people with an open identity center, your sense of identity is very much more external. That's why I don't know if this is for you, you can tell me, but for me, it is more about like things on the outside of me. And I don't know if maybe for you, it feels very more like of an internal process.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And from my understanding, for people with an open identity center, it's correct to try different things on to see how it feels. So it's not to say that you don't still have your own individual style. It's just in order to kind of discover what that looks like, you need to kind of try things on and taste a few different things from other people. And, you know, as I say, taste, like the eighth gate, I've also heard it referred to as being a tastemaker. So it's almost like these people with this eighth gate energy are the ones who are kind of creating these trends, being a tastemaker, you know, putting new styles and new things out there for other people who have the openness to kind of try on and see if it fits and see if they like it. And something else I wanted to share. Oh, well, you asked me like what my experience is like with that. And yes, I have my whole life, I think always, in some way, I've always wanted to be different. I've always wanted to do things differently than other people. And I've also always wanted to shine. Like I've always kind of wanted to be a little bit in the spotlight. And for a long time, I felt like a bit ashamed of that, or maybe that's a bad thing to want that. And I don't know, perhaps there is a part of it that is conditioned, wanting to, or thinking that fame or being seen and recognized will make me feel more validated. I think there definitely is part of it that would be conditioned, but I also do think that there's just like this really innocent part of my soul that just wants to shine and just wants to express itself, which really I think is coming from this channel of inspiration, this 1/8 wanting to be an inspiration and wanting to kind of shine. And he talks about it in the gift, I believe, about even the Siddhi, exquisiteness. These people kind of shine, and they you can't help but see them.
Yeah.
And draw attention. And I mean, ever since I was little, I wanted to be, I think I've told you the story about how I played the trumpet ever since I was 7, and I wanted to be like front and center. I wanted to be up there on the stage. I wanted to be performing. And I was also really into drama. I wanted to do acting. I was really into music. And then more recently, in the last decade, I've been into expressing my creativity in other ways through nail art, and then through new ways. It's kind of evolved over time, but it's always been a consistent energy for me, I think, this wanting to kind of express myself and then being seen and recognized. And maybe that's the projected energy coming in there, you know, wanting to kind of be invited out and shared.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have 1 nor the 8, but I do relate to this like wanting to shine kind of thing, and going against what maybe against the norm, or just really wanting to be different. Oftentimes I feel like it may cause me some trouble, to be honest, just because I feel like it'll come across a little forceful in my like closer circles, basically with my family, maybe.
I wonder if it's the manifestor energy as well.
I do. Well, that's what I was going to say, because I don't have like 1 or 8, but I do feel like some of these things that you talk about feel like they could just be qualities of, you know, having that manifestor energy.
And also we have to remember that the manifestor energy is having that connection to the throat, and the throat being where we manifest, where we express. And so I'm sure there's something to that too. Wanting to be big, I think. Wanting to be big and express your bigness. And I feel that, but for me it definitely feels like it wants to be in a creative way. And so that's perhaps where that channel comes in. Yeah. And so, well, shall we look at the shadow, the different shadow expressions, perhaps?
Yeah, let's do it.
Because he talks about, so the repressive nature is wooden. And what did you take from that?
Honestly, I thought it was so strange to have the word wooden be the word to characterize a quality of being. Like, honestly, I just think of a stick. Honestly, two things. I think of a stick, and then I think of Woody from Toy Story. Like in his when he's not being a toy. Well, yeah, when he's not like when he's being a toy, actually, right? Not his his living character. I can't even speak today.
Right. So it's kind of like it's like not moving. It's like,
which is that what it is?
I suppose wouldn't
remember.
Yeah. Well, he also mentions being hollow. So such lives are wooden lives, and such people have allowed themselves to become hollow. They gave up on their dreams somewhere between being a child and growing into an adult. And the result is that they live lives that do not belong to them or allow them space to breathe or create. So it's almost like they're stuck in this.
Yeah. You know, I'll say I do remember reading it. I feel as if that's how I view a lot of people. You know, just sort of, and because I speak to people often and hear their stories, I can hear how because we've sort of been in this machinery of how life should go and what we should do and the path we should take, that we are sort of like sunken or lost on a soul level. I often will talk to people and hear like what their dreams are and what they'd like to do, and then I'm like, well, why aren't you doing it? Like, what's getting in the way? Like, and again, this is kind of where I feel like maybe it gets a little forceful or pushy. Let's because I want to like break down all those barriers that make you feel like you can't have that. I don't know what it is, but I'm just like, well, if you could have it today in the smallest way, how would you possibly have it? Because then it's just so much more, I can imagine, enjoyable, right? But I do feel like because of the way in which we're sort of taught to live life, and maybe this is changing, maybe it really is taking a big leap in a different direction. I don't see a lot of people living what they would truly love to live.
And this is where perhaps we need these people who are demonstrating it through their own self-expression and creativity, and having this kind of courage, this rebellious nature of showing and demonstrating to other people, like, you can have it too. Yeah. And it makes me think of maybe a positive aspect of social media is that it's so much easier today to find people who we can look to for inspiration, for a new way of being, to see and to demonstrate and show us that there is a way, another way to live, that we don't have to be stuck in the same mediocre lives. And this is where I've come to with social media, realizing that it's neither good nor bad. It's how we're interacting with it. And I think so much of my frustration with social media comes from seeing so much imitation. And he talks about this in the chapter, being this is part of the shadow frequency, is people who aren't able to kind of look within themselves and find out who they are, so they just imitate other people. And I think I get really frustrated when I see that happening on social media, even with the people who are seen as being creative and creators. They're going along and doing things the same way that everyone else is doing them. And that's where I've kind of come to this place recently where I'm like, I don't want to do anything that anyone else is doing. I want to do it in my own completely unique way, because I know that this is how I'm supposed to operate. And this is actually how I can help and serve the most people, is by being myself. And not doing what other people are doing, and not looking to other people for inspiration, because it is within me.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the reactive?
The reactive is artificial. So in the reactive nature, this spirit is channeled into the world where it creates an illusion of itself based upon its dreams. Right.
Where it's like, to me, I'm like, okay, so let's take the other side of the same coin you just shared with Instagram, right? Because then it's like, we can also put up like a facade, and I think he even uses the word facade, maybe, of the life that we're living. And it doesn't have to be through social media, right? Like, let's just take it like into, day-to-day, face-to-face interactions with the people or how you just are experiencing life, that we can always sort of show up in something that's not really as it is. And I think that that's okay. I feel like in some way that's also like part of our survival, right? For the time and the place that we're in. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think he talks about how, like, on the surface, these people look like they're successful and that their lives are special or unique or whatever, but on the inside it is just artificial or a facade, because they're not truly demonstrating their dreams or what it would be to live their dreams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say it's interesting because I had a discussion with my family about this, because something very much came up for me recently around the way in which I perceive somebody that I used to be very close with. And they came to this point in their life where they're like at this new milestone for them, right? I would believe that most people would consider getting engaged maybe a milestone or something that they truly want, whatever, this step in life. I don't know how everyone sees it. But that's kind of sort of part of, like, I think what everyone's getting out of, or a lot of people may be getting out of, is that, you know, we have to be married and maybe fall into this line of story, whatever. I don't know what the story is, but it brought something up in me. Like I was honestly kind of shaken up a little bit, only because of my own like comparison of how I view my life in the stage of life that I'm at now. And I don't really know how this all relates, quite honestly, to everything that we're talking about. Just that I know, like, I sort of had this moment of thinking, like, I once thought my life was going to go this particular way. And maybe in some ways it does relate when you talk about how, like, we're sort of taught to follow this system, right? Whether it starts in preschool and grade school and then on. But I feel like I've broken away a lot from the idea that I had my life would go. And so I can't really, words are just don't have enough right now for me to explain the way then I felt. But it was almost kind of like I went through like a moment of grief, of thinking that, like, maybe at one point in my life I thought I'd be part of this person's day, this special moment, and I'm not anymore. At a point in my life, maybe I thought I was even going to be in that same place at where I'm at right now, and I'm not. And I think it just goes back to, like, again, to bring up the deconditioning. I feel as when you go through exploring these different frequencies, go through systems like the Gene Keys or human design, where they are at times a bit confronting to the way in which you maybe believed about something or the way you see things, right? I think that what comes up for me is a lot of this goes into what people talk about when they say we're going to undergo like a paradigm shift, like the way that we behave as a society, collectively, individually, on a bigger scale, really is sort of changing. And I feel like, you know, through our discussions, we realize how much our lives maybe aren't as we anticipated, and breaking away to be different, to kind of create our own paths to things that can oftentimes feel really scary. And I'm just noticing how it's not only in, and what I'm noticing is, like, things can sort of come along your way that will sort of take you back, and you didn't really expect it to happen. Like me seeing this person get engaged, I didn't think I was gonna like be kind of like shaken up by it for a moment, but I was. And so I sort of just held myself a little more gently and compassionately to honor, like, it's okay that that's not my process right now, and it's okay that it is that person's process. It's totally okay for this to be where each of us are at. So yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think, well, first of all, none of whatever we're talking about is said with judgment, because I think that everybody is on their own unique path, and we all need to be in the shadows of these expressions in order to extract the gift, in order to move into those higher frequencies. So everyone is just on their own path. And I often have to remind myself of this when I looked at what other people are doing and their choices and the paths that they're on. And it comes from a really good place, because I've been there and I've seen those quote unquote mistakes. I mean, by calling it a mistake, I am in a way judging the way people are living their lives. But I have to remind myself that I was there before, and I've gone through certain things that have shifted the way I see the world and shifted my perspective. And so you can't expect people to see things the way you do, because they're not on the same path as you. And I'm really glad that you brought up this idea of like an engagement or a marriage being a milestone in life, and something that it definitely is. I think it kind of ingrained in us as something that we should want to pursue, or is like a really positive thing. I mean, yes, I think it definitely is a beautiful thing if you meet someone that you fall in love with and you have that connection with, and you want to make that commitment to them. I think that that's a beautiful thing. But I can see, because I've been through it myself, how I think from the outside, again, I don't know, I'm not in other people's shoes, but you can see how a lot of people are rushing into what it seems to be like rushing into these kind of things, or following this path because they think that that's what they should do, or that's what we've been conditioned to believe is the right path in life. And from my experience, I saw so much of these shadow frequencies in my old self. And I also want to say that even though I have this gift, or this gate defined, I don't think that I've mastered it. I don't think that I don't want to come across as being like high and mighty just because I have this gift. And I do think that in a way I'm stepping into embodying this gift, but I had to go through following a path that wasn't right for me. And, that looked like staying in a relationship where I was abandoning myself for my needs and my emotional needs. And it also looked like me going along with getting engaged and buying a house and getting married and doing all the things that I thought were expected for me on this path that's kind of laid out for us. And then for me, it took going through, and he even talks about this, I think, at the very start of the chapter. He says, only when life forces you to grow through some kind of crisis or the death of a loved one, for example, do you come to experience your true nature outside the borders of this comfort zone. Like, wow, that's so powerful. But for me, I mean, there was a death, like I had a pregnancy loss which was kind of like the catalyst for me to change direction and actually reconnect with myself and experience my true nature outside of that comfort zone of just following this path that's kind of laid out. And then there was also an ego death, a death of who I thought I was and what I thought my life would be. And like you said before, grieving what I thought my life was going to look like. And it was scary as hell to make the choice to leave that situation and to go against the grain and in a way rebel against this path that life had laid out, or society, I won't even say life, society has laid out, and the expectations of others. And, I've seen in a way how me doing that has inspired other people to do it too, because I know a few people in my life who've left unhealthy relationships since I kind of paved the way to do that. I don't want to take full credit. Again, everyone's on their own journey and they're learning things in their own way. But for me, it was seeing someone else around my age also leave a marriage. That was kind of like that example for me that I could do it. And it was also seeing healthy relationships displayed and being like, wow, I really want that. And that was me then checking in with my heart and listening to my authority of wanting more out of a relationship, wanting to be in a relationship that was more supportive and emotionally healthy. And so I think even this is such a consistent energy for me, I don't feel like I've mastered it. I've definitely been on a journey of going through that shadow, and it's taken seeing other examples to even give me the courage to do it. But I've seen how me taking those steps and following a new path or paving a new path has also inspired other people to do the same. So I've seen that like inspiration in action. And I mean, yeah, I was met with a lot of judgment. I did feel completely ostracized from most people in my life. I lost most of my friendships through that period, but I can honestly say that it's been the best thing ever for me, because now I feel like I can be myself. It's freeing. It's so freeing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like it's such a gift to have the examples, the people to look towards that give us sort of an idea of what do we truly want? Like, what do our hearts really want? And I think that maybe even in your share today, like, who knows how this channel of inspiration has just sort of come out of you so naturally, and us having this conversation and you really just sharing how it's come up with you. I mean, I feel like I see it because I see how it inspires me to take on, like, to forge ahead in my own like path. Like, yes, I've come into human design and I've learned some really like remarkable things and experimented with some like life-changing things. But being in your presence also gives me like a deeper faith in just like really just owning who I am, like in this moment, like how I want to show up. And we might have talked about this before, but I've wanted to do a podcast for a while. Like, this is something that came up a lot last year. And I feel like it's been such a gift to have been called out to take on this opportunity to share my own like expression of how I interpret these things, how I understand them, what it's like for me, and also just like maybe here and there sharing a message that I want to share with the world. And I feel like, oh, this is such manifestor energy right now, because this is part of the gate that connects to your throat, which again, like we said in the beginning, does make you embody a manifestor energy. You do have manifestor energy.
And for both of us, we were invited. There was that projected energy of invitation, because for me, I felt the invitation from life, because I'm not really the kind of person to just randomly out of the blue be like, hey, so-and-so, do you like someone I've only just met a handful, someone I haven't really gotten to know we've never met in person. It was very, it was almost bigger than me, that invitation, because I just kind of felt like this is just something I want to do and this is something I've got to do. So I kind of just felt this call from life, like, well, Rafa's and you in a way had kind of invited me, because you'd informed that you wanted to start a podcast. And then I felt the call to reach out and be like, let's do it. And then for you, you were invited by life and you were invited by me. So it's just like a beautiful kind of representation of how this energy can kind of play out.
Yeah. And no doubt that your gift of the channel of inspiration is so present in this creation for us, I believe. And I think that that's oftentimes like when you're in moments of alignment and really in your zone, I feel like that's when the channels are like highly activated, if I'm correct. Like when you're really in that place of feeling aligned, feeling connected in your thing, honoring yourself in all kinds of ways, is when like just the greatness of what is carried through in those channels comes out. And so it's such an honor to like have your 1/8 come through.
Oh, thank you. Well, it comes out naturally, doesn't it? When we're not in our minds thinking about how we should be, these things just kind of like naturally flow out of us. And yeah, I mean, thank you. Like, thank you, because you've also helped to reflect a lot of this back to me, because like I've said earlier, I can't often see these things for myself. So it's really nice to receive that and to have someone reflect that back. But also it's been really healing for me to have someone who I can just talk to openly and freely and not feel like I am going to be judged or kind of, I don't know, cast aside in a way. Like I have felt that and perhaps this goes back to that shadow frequency. It's like this fear of stepping out into our individuality is what keeps us the same and keeps us small. And I have felt that in a lot of friendships and over the years. I mean, my circle's changed a lot, and I'm very grateful to have a small circle who I do feel quite supported by. But particularly our relationship has been really healing for me, because it's really nice to first of all talk about things that I'm passionate about and excited about and interested in, and then also to not feel like I can just speak freely, to not feel like I have to filter myself or yeah.
And the 8 comes out of the throat for anyone listening. So maybe we can just also not touch on that. What I'm saying is like maybe for those who are listening can hear how maybe the 8 gate has it has a voice that is being shared and expressed here even today. Because I've often heard that when it comes to the throat center, that each of the gates sort of have their own voice. Have you heard that? Yeah. And I often wonder like what all of mine really sound like. And it's not something that I fully have played around yet, but I'm wondering if you can recognize what the 8th gate sounds like for you.
Oh, I love that question. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I don't think I've spent enough time learning about the 8th gate energy. I've focused a lot on the first, maybe because it's the first number in the chart. And I have it activated twice in my chart. It's in my Pluto on both sides. And so I haven't focused or spent as much time looking at the 8th energy, but I want to learn more about it. But it definitely feels like it has this rebellious energy. It feels almost like it's like a cheeky kind of like, I know that this could be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. And I'm going to do it in a really creative way so that it's kind of received better. It's almost like a little bit innocent, a little bit cheeky. Like, I know it's the truth. I know that what I'm sharing is the capital T truth, but I'm going to do it in a way that's like kind of can be accepted because it's presented in an artistic or a creative way. That's kind of how it feels to me.
So tell me if this is it, because I feel like I'm hearing it in my head.
Yeah.
When you'll make reels that they sort of go along the lines of like, we need to let go of the idea, or you shouldn't have to do anything that's like, or it is totally okay to, like, I feel like it comes across as, yes, like confirming the rebellion or like the rebellious nature, or just like the complete difference. Like, what is validating? That's what it is. It's like, it's also, it seems like
it's very short of itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there. Keep going.
No. That's it. And I wonder if we like explore, or if anybody out there has the eighth and knows what we're talking about and can sort of share with us what the eighth sounds like for them. I wonder how different and or similar it would be to what you've just shared, what we just kind of like shared.
Totally. Well, it makes me think of a few things. And first of all, I created a reel. Well, it was a TikTok actually, but I am going to post it on Instagram. This is another thing I've been going through is I've come to this place, and it's probably through learning more about this energy within me, but I've come to this place, like I said before, where I just don't want to do things the way that anyone else is doing them. And I think that the best way for me to do that and to create from this really kind of pure place of creation and creativity is to create first, and then to repurpose whatever it is that I feel called to create for social media, because creating for social media feels artificial. It feels forced. It feels formulated. It feels like I'm just trying to create for content's sake. And then that takes it away from the creativity, and it takes it away from like what I'm trying to, why I even want to create in the first place. And this is what I created this TikTok about yesterday. And it was cheeky. It was like, I don't want to be a content creator. And I said it. I was like, I am not a content creator. I am a person who, a human being sharing their life, sharing what they love, sharing their creativity, their soul, their heart, their inspiration. And I'm not doing it for an algorithm. I'm not going to do it anymore. And this is where I feel like the manifestor energy comes in to almost like push that out in a bit more of a, like I have this softer energy, but then and creative feminine energy. And then I also have this like, I don't know, manifestor bold energy that's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be called, don't call me a content creator. I don't create content. I create. I'm a human being, just like everybody else. We're all creating. Like when we call something content, we diminish its value. We turn it into something that's purely for social media and not for the sake of creativity. And I know that certain people may be triggered when I say this stuff. I know there's people out there whose entire careers are based on content creation or being a content creation specialist or strategist or whatever, because I see it all over my For You page on TikTok. But I don't care. This is how I feel. And this has been my journey. And you don't have to listen if it's not relevant to you. Like this is just me sharing my truth. And it's interesting because the other thing that it's brought up for me, and I can tell I'm getting passionate here, I also have the gate of enthusiasm. So that comes out of the throat. It's this gate 16. And it is, I notice it in myself. Sometimes I get fired up in these moments where I have this kind of enthusiasm, and maybe that helps to carry the message in a way. But I also have the channel of initiation, which is, again, what makes me a manifestor. So these two channels that have to kind of come together to connect my heart, which also has this kind of passion and fiery energy, to my throat. And this channel of initiation, I have to kind of go through these initiations in life. And this is where I feel like with social media, it's taken me going through doing things in a certain way, following the path, the way that everyone else is doing it, and learning that that doesn't feel right to me. That's not how I want to create and express myself. And then it comes out. Once I've kind of learned this lesson, it then comes out in this channel of inspiration as some kind of creative message where I'm just telling the truth, how I feel, the truth of my heart. I think you're muted, Rafa.
Oh, sorry. Oops. What I was saying was, but it also, like, to relate it to the eighth, though, it so much is an inspiration to get out of the quote unquote norm, which relates a lot to the eighth in mediocrity.
Mm.
And then, moving into, I forgot what the gift is. Remind me.
Style.
that right style, which again, if as we went through it, is so much deeper, more about like just your personal identity of how you want to express and sort of be and show up and live. And so, gosh, thank you, because
thank you.
I've felt it, and I hope that everyone listening can feel that and can sort of take away that, like, no, you don't have to do it the same way everyone else has done it or is doing it, and it's totally okay.
And this is perhaps where I have issue with these social media strategists because, and like, again, no judgment. I absolutely don't mean to judge anyone, but I know it's already coming across that way. So I'm just going to say it, is that a lot of these people, and probably there are great social media strategists out there saying like, what works for one person won't work for everyone. And so when you're kind of trying to teach people one set way of doing things, it just doesn't apply, and it's just not helpful for most people. And I think this is where he talks about these people wanting to free thinkers. And
yes,
feel like that. I feel like when I've gone through, when I really create something that I feel passionate about and I feel like is a truth that I want to share, I feel like, yes, it's for me. It's like me expressing what I feel to be the truth of my heart, but it's also in a bid to kind of free other people from their limited thinking, to free other people and to help them to see things in a different way and to shift their perspective around perhaps the way that they're creating and expressing themselves, only to the service of them, only so that they can feel more free and they don't have to feel so limited by what it is that they're creating. Like everyone deserves to be able to think outside the box and not be limited. I feel like so much of social media and so much of just like the society we live in wants to place people in boxes. And I think our souls just want to be free from those boxes and those limitations and those definitions. And I think he talks about this so much in this chapter. It really is about freeing ourselves from the limitations and the definitions of doing things in the same way, which keeps us as mediocre.
Yeah.
We're all doing the same thing. There's no originality.
I don't know about you guys, but I needed to hear that. I needed that for myself too.
Can I just say one more thing?
Go for it. Let it rip.
Like when I feel like I have come to a place of confidence within myself because I've been through this journey, like if I was to come out and say these things that I'm thinking without taking that time to sit back and reflect and sit with it and let it brew, like we were talking about at the start of this conversation, and to have that time alone as the manifestor and as the hermit and the 2-5, like if I don't give myself that time and that space to kind of sit with what I feel like is true, I can come across as aggressive, or I can come across as like judgmental. But I think when I know these things to be true and I've gone through that process, I mean, true for me, like everyone's experience is different, but when I've gone through that process of initiation and like learning that for myself and what it means, what I feel is true, then I am able to kind of let go of what other people think. Sure, there's still a little bit of fear of being rejected. I mean, social media can be a really scary place. If you say something, there's cancel culture, there's all these things that could turn on you. People are, and maybe this is the shadow frequency. This is what keeps people being mediocre, is because they're afraid to step out and say things that perhaps other people are thinking, but they're afraid of being cancelled. They're afraid of being, I mean, it's just human nature. We want to belong. We want to be a part of society. We want to be accepted. But I think that what happens is when we allow that fear to control us, or allow that fear to keep us small and keep us mediocre, then we end up abandoning ourselves and we end up limiting what's possible for us to create. And it just goes back to this Siddhic state, I think, of these people just want everyone to be free to express themselves, and they don't even care about whether or not what other people think, because they're so free within themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Sorry, I talked so much.
No, it's such a delight to hear. And I love it. I love a fired up Hannah.
Thank you for listening. Well, it doesn't happen often, but it should. I think this is the manifestor wound. You go ahead.
Well, as I was listening to you, and I don't know, this is maybe something that we can like sit with and see, because oftentimes, we've also expressed how, people are an exchange of energy. And I've heard you say, like, sometimes I don't know how to get like these big ideas that I have to come out. And if recap real quick, Hannah does not have her head center connected to her throat, whereas I do have like my ajna connected to my throat. And in some way we make up this channel. So I just wonder if it's no coincidence that like maybe I didn't have a lot to say. One, I don't have this defined. So I love listening to your experience, but also too, like, I wonder if the exchange of what happened maybe was this ability to carry these things that you are just so passionate about, that you do have, and allow them to speak them so effortlessly. Because I will say that that's how it sounded. It really sounded like this was just something that needed to come out so effortlessly, and it really did.
Oh, thank you. And exactly. I can't take credit for this, because it's us sharing this energy which enables it to come out. And I'm sure it works both ways for both of us in different scenarios, with different conversations, different concepts that we're exploring, and different energies that we do or don't have defined. So thank you for supporting me to express myself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. And I do feel like, I was just thinking before, that it's scary, because as a manifestor, we both want to shine. We both want to express ourselves, and I think everyone does, but I think it's particularly prominent for us, is wanting to kind of have this big energy, because that's why we came here as manifestors, to be big in the world. But often I do find, like, after the fact, I'll be like, oh gosh, I said too much, or I spoke too much, or whatever it may be. And I'm sure this is just shining a light on some deconditioning that wants to be done, to kind of work through some of those shadows of feeling like I need to stay small. And anyway, that was just that. But yeah, this has been fun.
This has been so fun. So fiery. I love it. It was really good. If anybody has the 8th gate and or the channel of inspiration, please share with us how it is for you. We'd love to hear. And so until next time, guys.
See you next week. Thank you.